Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling the idea of letting go.
Ooh, that's a big one.
Yeah, it is. And to help us unpack it, we're turning to The Power of Letting Go.
By John Purkiss.
That's the one. He spent 20 years researching, all sorts of spiritual traditions to figure out what really works.
Sounds intense.
It is. And the crazy part is, the most effective methods for letting go, they're often the opposite of what you'd expect.
Okay, now you've got me intrigued. Where do we even begin with something as big as letting go?
Well, Purkiss breaks it down into 3 stages.
3 stages.
Yeah. And the first one is all about being present.
Being present, like mindfulness.
Sort of, but Purkiss takes it a step further. He sees it as like a heightened awareness, not just on the meditation cushion, but in everyday life.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this might be different than your typical self-help stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to illustrate this idea of being present, Purkiss uses a pretty compelling example from his own life.
Oh, let's hear it.
So he used to get into a lot of fender benders, minor car accidents.
Really?
Yeah, and he realized it was because his mind was so focused on goals and, the future that he wasn't fully paying attention to the road.
Ah, I see. So he was basically driving on autopilot.
Exactly. But once he learned to be present, he says it was like he developed this superpower for navigating life's, obstacles. He could anticipate what other drivers would do and avoid those accidents.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful example of how being present can have real-world consequences.
Right. It's not just some airy-fairy concept. It can actually make you a safer driver.
That's pretty convincing. But how do we actually become more present? Any practical tips?
Well, Purkiss talks about several techniques in the book, but one of the simplest and, he says, most effective is focusing on your breath.
Ah, good old breath work.
Exactly. He calls the untrained mind a monkey mind because, it's constantly jumping around.
Makes sense. Mine definitely feels like that sometimes.
Right. But by focusing on your breath, you can kind of anchor your attention.
Tame that monkey mind.
Exactly. And that leads to a greater sense of presence.
Makes sense. So stage 1, being present. What's next in this letting go journey?
Stage 2 gets even more interesting. It's about letting go of negative thoughts.
Okay, that sounds pretty standard self-help fare.
But there's a twist. It's not about just ignoring them or pushing them away. It's about actually dismantling them.
Dismantling them. How do you dismantle a thought?
That's where Purkiss's research gets really fascinating. He makes this distinction between fleeting negative thoughts and those deeper ingrained stories we tell ourselves.
I think I see where this is going.
The ones that have been with us for years, shaping how we see the world.
Oh yeah, those.
To illustrate this point, he talks about a friend of his who felt stuck in her career. She felt like there was this glass ceiling she could never break through.
A classic limiting belief.
Exactly. And when they dug deeper into this belief, they realized it stemmed from her childhood experiences and this perception of wealth as inherently unfair.
So her past was shaping her present.
Right. It wasn't just a random negative thought. It was a deeply rooted belief that was holding her back.
Yeah.
Like a blueprint she was carrying around.
That's a really important distinction. And it makes you realize how powerful these subconscious beliefs can be.
Absolutely. But it doesn't stop there.
It doesn't.
No. Purkiss argues that clinging to positive labels can also be limiting.
Wait, positive labels too? How so?
Well, he says that holding on to labels like, I'm a winner, can set us up for disappointment.
I can kind of see that.
You're constantly afraid of failing and losing that label.
Right. It creates this pressure to live up to an image.
And it can also prevent you from exploring new sides of yourself.
That's so true. If you define yourself solely by your successes, then you might be afraid to try new things where you might not succeed.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that growth often happens outside our comfort zones.
Yeah.
And that includes the possibility of, not always winning.
Embracing those failures.
Exactly. Okay, this is really making me think about all those, invisible scripts we're running on. But what about deeper stuff? Emotional pain,
Yeah.
The wounds we carry from the past. Can we really just think our way out of that kind of hurt?
That's where Purkiss's second stage comes in. Letting go of pain.
Oh, okay.
And he's not talking about burying it or pretending it doesn't exist.
So what's the approach?
It's about confronting the pain head on.
Head on.
Yeah, he actually shares a pretty personal story in the book about letting go of a childhood memory. He was made fun of for his accent.
Oh.
And he used this technique called relive to relieve.
Relive to relieve. What's that?
Basically, you repeatedly revisit the memory, like really immerse yourself in it until the emotional charge starts to fade.
Hmm. So you're kind of desensitizing yourself to the pain by experiencing it over and over again.
Yeah, the idea is to take away its power over you.
That's interesting. Does he give any other examples of this in action?
He does. There's a story about a woman named Hallie who used relive to relieve to get over her fear of flying.
A fear of flying. How did that work?
So she had this traumatic experience as a kid related to heights.
Ah, I see.
And by reliving that memory repeatedly, she was finally able to break free from that phobia.
That's incredible. Like it actually worked.
Yeah. It sounds counterintuitive, but it can be super effective for dealing with like deep-seated fears and anxieties.
Okay, so we've got stage 1, being present. Stage 2, letting go of pain. What's the final stage of this letting go process?
Well, this is where things get really interesting and maybe a little tricky. It's about complete surrender.
Surrender, like giving up.
No, not at all. It's not about giving up on your goals. It's more about surrendering to the idea that maybe, just maybe, the universe has a different plan for you.
Okay, so you're still moving towards what you want, but you're not so attached to how it's going to happen.
Exactly. You're open to the possibility that there might be an even better path, one you haven't even considered.
That makes sense. But like, how do you actually do that? Surrender.
He uses a great example, the invention of Post-it notes.
Post-it notes.
Yeah, you know, that sticky stuff. Turns out it was a total accident. The scientist was trying to make this super strong glue, and he ended up with this weak adhesive that wasn't good for much.
Okay, but how does that relate to surrender?
Well, if he had been super rigid about his goal, like only focused on that super strong glue, he would have missed out on this whole other invention.
Right. Because he was open to the unexpected, he stumbled onto something totally new.
Exactly. Sometimes those detours lead to the best destinations.
I love that. Okay, so this leads us to something I've been wanting to ask about. Manifesting our desires. Purkiss has this whole thing about manifesting our beliefs, not our desires. What's that about?
Yeah, it's like you can wish for things all you want, but if your beliefs are holding you back...
It's not going to happen.
Exactly. He says there's often this, like, internal resistance that we need to deal with first.
So like self-sabotage.
Yeah, kind of. He suggests this exercise where you write down a desire, and then you write down every reason your mind throws up as to why it can't happen.
Oh, I see. So you're bringing those hidden beliefs to the surface.
Yeah. He calls them incompletions, things you need to let go of before you can truly move forward.
That makes a lot of sense. So you're basically removing those mental roadblocks to what you want to achieve.
Exactly. Clear the path, then watch the magic happen.
Okay, so we've uncovered these incompletions, but how do we actually get rid of them? I mean, dismantling those deep-seated beliefs, that sounds pretty tough.
It can be, no doubt. But Purkiss offers a bunch of techniques. One that really stands out is called completion.
Completion.
Yeah, basically you go back to those painful experiences from your past, you know?
That way.
But the key is you really allow yourself to feel those emotions.
So you're not trying to, like, push them away or anything.
Nope. You actually lean into the discomfort, and eventually you're able to release them.
So it's like you have to feel it to heal it.
Exactly. And Purkiss says when you do that, when you truly complete something, it's incredibly freeing.
Like a weight has been lifted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He describes it as this feeling of lightness. And he stresses that it's not like a one-time thing.
So it's a process.
Yeah, it's about constantly becoming aware of and releasing those beliefs that are no longer serving you.
So like peeling back the layers.
Exactly. Shedding those old skins.
I love that. You know, this makes me think about the idea of surrender again. Is there a connection between letting go of pain and surrendering to something bigger?
Absolutely. Purkiss describes surrender as like a state of oneness with existence.
Oneness. Wow.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that you're not separate from the universe, from the flow of life.
So when we let go of all that baggage, those painful memories, limiting beliefs, we create space for something else to come in.
Exactly. You're clearing out the clutter to make room for the extraordinary.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about those times when we're feeling lost or stuck? You know, like when it seems like nothing is working. How can we surrender in those moments?
Purkiss says those are the times when surrender is most important. It's in those moments of breakdown that we have the biggest opportunity for breakthroughs.
So, like hitting rock bottom can actually be a good thing.
In a way, yeah. Because it forces you to let go of the old ways of doing things, to stop trying to control everything.
And just trust.
Exactly. Trust that there's a greater wisdom guiding you, even if you can't see it yet.
Okay, but how do we know if we're actually surrendering? Like, are there any signs?
It's a super personal thing, but Purkiss says you might feel a sense of peace or calmness, even amidst the chaos.
Like a sense of acceptance.
Yeah, you're not fighting against reality anymore. You're flowing with it.
That's beautiful. This whole conversation about letting go is really powerful.
Hmm.
But I'm sure some of our listeners are wondering, like, how do I apply this to my own goals and desires?
Hmm.
Did Purkiss offer any advice on that?
Oh, absolutely. He has a whole chapter on manifesting. And he stresses that, it all starts with identifying those incompletions we talked about.
Right, those hidden beliefs.
Yeah, and he suggests doing that exercise, where you write down your desire and then all the reasons why it can't happen.
To shine a light on those roadblocks.
Exactly. Then you can start to dismantle them.
And how do we do that? Dismantle them, I mean.
He suggests a few techniques, like the completion process we talked about, as well as visualization and affirmations. But the main thing is to really align your actions and beliefs with your desires.
So it's not just about wishing and hoping.
Nope, it's about taking inspired action, trusting your gut, and believing that the universe has got your back.
I love that. Well, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into the power of letting go. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. What are you ready to let go of? Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.